Hey guys, welcome to week 4 of the Healthy Happy Gut program. Hope you guys are really starting to notice some really good improvements at the moment. You should definitely be starting to see some differences now. Now, this week what we will be discussing is why we're going gluten, dairy and soy free. And also refined carbohydrate and sugar free, which isn't actually written on that nutrition plan. Well, it's not written that the plan is that as well. Okay, so the reason why we do that, and I have touched on this topic in the other videos that I've done. However, it's like I have said before, it's really important to remove those things that cause inflammation in the gut and also feed parasites and bacteria in our gut. So it's going to be a lot harder to kill the bacteria and also start to notice differences if we have these foods constantly entering our body, especially if we are reactive to foods and we don't know it. So a lot of the signs and symptoms of food intolerances can be related to your gut health. So although you might be thinking that it is parasite related or it's because you have candida, it's also really good to know that certain foods do cause issues in our body, and the way they show up is different for everyone. For an example, my acne was a lot worse before I went gluten and dairy free. Now I had tried dairy free separately and gluten free separately. Didn't really notice that much difference because I was still reacting to one or the other foods. Now when I took both of them out of my diet at the same time, big differences started to happen and I felt a lot better for it. So the thing is, we don't know if we're reacting to those foods unless they're removed. So that's why it's really important over the course of this 8 weeks to be dairy and gluten and soy free for as much as you possibly are able to, because every amount that you have accidentally with slip-ups, or even even if you know you shouldn't be having it but you have it, it does take 4 weeks to remove from our body. So we can experience symptoms from ingesting a food that we're intolerant to for 4 weeks, up to 4 weeks later. Okay, so it's really important to take those foods away and out of the diet for the course of the 8 weeks, so that one, you're able to identify if you do have food intolerances and if your issues are actually because of those foods or for other reasons. It's also really important to take them out of the diet because we know that most people get inflammation in the gut from consuming those foods. Now, another thing about dairy is, so with dairy in particular, if you were a kid or you have kids that was really prone to tonsillitis or ear infections or ear aches, that's associated with dairy intolerance. So when you're having that enlarged tonsils, if you remove dairy out of your diet, you would most likely see a really positive difference. So I'm not just saying this because obviously I have my sensitivities. I don't think everyone does, but I do think most of us do suffer some sort of issues due to foods that we're consuming that our body's reacting to. And so it's really important then to take those foods out so that we can feel better, because if we keep consuming them, we're not going to feel better. So another thing with dairy is it's mucus forming. So if you have congestion issues, it's going to be worse with dairy. So if you take that dairy away, your mucus will actually most likely go away as well, unless it is a bacterial thing. So some of the signs and symptoms you might experience if you have intolerances are obviously bowel movement irregularity, so constipation or diarrhea, really smelly farts, congestion, like constant congestion, if we have like an itchy throat or we're sneezing often or we've got to clear our throat often, these are signs and symptoms of intolerances. Other ones are like your headaches and brain fog, so that's a lot often associated with gluten intolerance. And gluten intolerance is also associated, and dairy as well, with skin conditions. So if you're an eczema child, or you have an eczema child, or you've got psoriasis, or really bad acne, all those skin conditions can be definitely made better by removing dairy and gluten. And hopefully more and more research is coming out about this, but in the naturopathic world, most naturopaths will say, if you've got a skin condition, well, let's remove dairy and gluten and see how you go from there. Because most of the time, majority of the time, clients will see a really positive difference in skin from removing those inflammatory foods. Now, the reason for soy is because in Australia, how it's processed is really not good for starters. When it's fermented, it's better. However, it also contributes to, so it's phytoestrogenic, so it promotes estrogen in the body. And the thing is, with women, a lot of us already have estrogen metabolism issues and have an excess of estrogen in our body. And there are a lot of phytoestrogenic things that contribute to that, but soy is a big one. So if you're consuming a lot of soy and you have hormonal issues, a good thing to do would be to take the soy out. So even in men, they are finding issues with soy as well. So it does change hormones. So it's really important to reduce that, because obviously if there's hormonal imbalances in the body, that's going to contribute to gut imbalances in the body as well, and vice versa. One of the things that I notice with soy, so occasionally I will have a vegan-based protein bar that has soy in it, and I find I get a lot of phlegm afterwards. So even that is a sign and symptom of an intolerance. So even though that might be the only thing that you notice, there could be other things going on in the body that are signs and symptoms that you're reacting to those foods. So biggest ones are obviously your digestive issues and complaints, like bowel movements, reflux, nausea, feeling like you need to vomit, bloating is a big one, rashes, redness, skin conditions, headaches and brain fog, and then hormonal imbalances as well. So taking out these inflammatory foods are going to make a positive difference for you. I could pretty much guarantee that. However, if they don't, that's okay too, but it's really important to identify if you are reacting to those foods or not. And yes, there are tests, but it's really ideal to actually see for yourself how you react to those foods. So at the end of this 8 weeks, if you've been dairy, gluten and soy free all this time, it would be a good idea to then reintroduce those foods one at a time. So you wouldn't go having, come the end of the 8 weeks, week 9, you wouldn't go having dairy, gluten and soy all in one meal, because chances are you will react pretty negatively to that, and you're not going to be sure which one, or if you're reacting to all of them or not. So what you would want to do upon reintroduction of foods is, once you've removed it for 4 to 8 weeks, you then would reintroduce, say, dairy first. Now you would have that for one meal, one day, wait 3 days, observe for any aggravations or symptoms that show up all of a sudden that weren't there prior to. So whether that be bowel movement irregularity, digestive complaints, skin issues, you might get a worse breakout, you might get a rash on your body, you might feel phlegmy or congested. So they're all signs and symptoms to look out for. So you would note that down. If you didn't experience any, then that's okay. You might want to keep in dairy in small amounts, maybe once every couple of days in the diet. So try not to go back to having it every single day if you can, because obviously with intolerances, you kind of have a bucket. So what happens is once we've cleared it all out of our system, we might be able to tolerate small amounts here and there. But what happens when we go having too much too soon can overfill that bucket quite quickly, and then we are back to square one because our bucket's being overfilled. So after you've done the dairy trial, and you're happy with your results, if you reacted, then obviously you would keep continuing to have that out of the diet, and then try and reintroduce in another 4 weeks to see if anything's better. Because at the end of the day, when you've worked on healing your gut and your gut is better, you should be able to tolerate those foods better than you were able to previously. So that's the idea. It's not to have to avoid those foods forever. However, if you know you feel better without and you want to avoid those foods, that's fine too. That's my personal preference. I just like to avoid altogether. Occasionally I would have dairy and gluten, but it's very rare because I know I feel better without it, and I know that my skin health is a lot better for it, and also hormonal issues are a lot better without it. So personally, if you want to keep it out of the diet, that's okay, but if you want to work towards a place where you can have those foods every few days, then go for it. But you need to make sure your gut's in really good nick before you go putting it all back in the diet every day. Okay, so once you've done that reintroduction, you then wait a week till all symptoms have cleared, and then you would introduce gluten or soy. So same process again, 1 meal, 1 day, wait 3 days, observe any changes, record any changes in symptoms, whether it be headaches, brain fog, tiredness, fatigue, or digestive complaints. If there is a change in symptoms that wasn't there before you had that gluten, write it down, even though it might seem unrelated. Okay? Again, if you do get those symptoms, you want to keep avoiding that food because you've only had that small amount. So if you were able to tolerate it without any symptoms, you may wish to keep it in your diet and just consume small amounts here and there, or work up to having it more often by making sure your gut's in good nick. And then lastly, you would introduce soy another week later. So it would take about 3 weeks, the reintroduction process. However, it's a really clear-cut way to identify exactly what foods give you what symptoms, and if they give you any symptoms. You might find they don't give you any symptoms, and that's okay too, totally fine, but you don't know if you don't try and see for yourself. So that's why I think it's really important in this Healthy Happy Gut program that we do eliminate for those 8 weeks, because like I said, you might be experiencing symptoms from food intolerances or sensitivities that you never knew you had. And chances are, like, intolerances are so common nowadays and it's being more picked up on, but we probably have had these sensitivities from birth, but then, we've just been told that's normal, that's what I've always had, so it must be normal, but it's really not, because like, for an example, you might have always had diarrhea your whole life, so always had loose running bowel movements. You go cutting out dairy, find out you have normal bowel movements, so really it wasn't the fact that running bowel movements were normal for you, it was the fact that all this time you were reacting to dairy. So yeah, I think it's really important to take those foods out, and I hope that helps you to continue doing what you're doing and helps to motivate you to stick to it. Even though it's difficult and you might be finding it hard to figure it all out, do your best to stick to it, and it'll be worth it, because at the end of the day, it's worth knowing whether you do have those food intolerance issues or not. Okay guys, have a great week. If you have any more questions about food intolerances or allergies or sensitivities, let me know. Of course, there are so many other food sensitivities that may be present, but working on our gut health will help to minimize them. There are so many different food sensitivities that you can have. You have salicylates, amine sensitivity. You might have heard about the fail-safe diet, which is like low chemical. You've got your FODMAP diet, which is your fructo-oligosaccharide foods that are high in content of those. So FODMAP foods might include like your beers, broccoli, onions, leeks. So it's actually a lot of those really good prebiotic foods causing fermentation in the gut. Now, why is that happening? Probably because you have SIBO, not a FODMAP issue. So it's really important to address them. If you do find that you react to certain foods over the course of this 8 weeks, let me know, because I'd be happy to help you identify what it is you are reacting to and why it is, if it's not dairy, gluten, or soy, or sugar. So if there are other issues, make sure you let me know, and I'm always happy to help. Yeah, I think that's about it with food sensitivities. Yeah. All right, guys, have a great week, and I will see you again next week. Bye.